handbag. That's right. Ancient Sumerians were more than familiar with handbags, or perhaps objects that modern people perceive as such.
In the dust of Mesopotamia, archaeologists dug up something buried that nobody can explain to this day. A handbag carved into stone, carried by the gods themselves. Then that exact same symbol turned up across the Atlantic in Mexico, buried at a site that predates the last ice age. That is not supposed to be possible. And here is the part almost nobody talks about. The bag itself was never the real mystery. The actual secret is what was sitting inside it. What they just found inside it is powerful enough to tear apart everything we have ever been taught. The story of this mystery begins in the dust of prehistory. At a site in modern-day Turkey called Gobekli Tepe, we find the oldest known examples. This place is unbelievably ancient, built around 9,600 BCE. That's 9,600 years before the birth of Christ. That's a staggering 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids of Giza. The builders had no metal tools, no wheels, no written language. They were hunter-gatherers who somehow organized hundreds of people to move 10-ton stone pillars and carve intricate symbols. This was a time before writing, before metal tools, even before widespread agriculture. And here, carved onto massive T-shaped stone pillars among stylized animals, we see it, the handbag. Clear as day, its presence here is a profound riddle from the very dawn of civilization. Then, fast forward several millennia to the place we often call the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, the land of Sumer, Assyria, and Babylon. Here, from about 2,500 to 700 BCE, the image is everywhere. This is where we see the most prolific and detailed depictions. It's no longer just an abstract shape on a pillar. It's held by powerful winged beings known as the Abkalu, semi-divine sages carved with exquisite detail into the walls of royal palaces. In this context, it looks deliberate, ritualistic, and deeply important. Then, on the opposite side of the planet, something impossible happened. The Olmec civilization carved the exact same thing. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in the lush landscapes of ancient Mexico, the meme civilization was rising. Around 900 to 400 BCE, they carved a now famous stone monument. It shows a figure, possibly a ruler or a shaman, emerging from the jaws of a great serpent. And what is in his hand? The very same object, the same rectangular pouch, the same curved handle. It's an unmistakable match. And these aren't the only examples. Echoes of this form pop up in later Persian art at the magnificent city of Pipolis. And some researchers see stylistic parallels in artifacts from the Minoans on Crete and the Indus Valley civilization. It's a pattern that simply refuses to be ignored. So with this global mystery laid out, where do we even begin to look for an answer? To solve a puzzle this big, you start with the clearest picture. To understand this symbol that spans the globe, we must first journey to the place where we have the most evidence, the most written texts, and where its image is most clearly defined, the ancient, dusty, and incredible world of Mesopotamia. Decoding the Mesopotamian Handbag. The journey to solve this mystery begins in the deserts of the Middle East, in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia. This is where the symbol appears most frequently and most clearly. To understand it, we must first meet the powerful beings who carry it. These are not ordinary men. They are the Abkalu. Think of them as semi-divine sage figures, the guardian spirits of civilization itself. Ancient texts describe them as beings created by the gods to act as intermediaries, bringing divine wisdom and the rules of society to humanity. In the stone carvings, they look the part. They are often shown as imposing muscular figures with magnificent wings, or sometimes with the heads of eagles, emphasizing their otherworldly nature. And they are almost never empty-handed. In one hand, they carry a strange pine cone-shaped object. In the other, they hold the very thing we are here to investigate, the mysterious handbag. This pairing is constant. It is a standard uniform for these divine guardians. So the meaning of the bag is tied directly to the meaning of the cone and the ritual they are performing. When British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard excavated the Assyrian city of Nimrod in 1845, he uncovered palace walls covered in these winged figures holding cones and bags. He called them mystic emblems, his way of saying, "I have no idea." Other excavations at Khorsabad and Nineveh found identical images, but the breakthrough didn't come from digging. It came from deciphering the wedge-shaped writing called cuneiform. The real breakthrough, the moment everything changed, didn't come from a new excavation. It came from the decipherment of ancient writing. Scholars were finally cracking the code of cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script of Mesopotamia. They began to read the thousands of clay tablets found in the ruins of these very palaces, and the story started to come together. The winged figures were indeed the Abkalu, just as suspected, but the objects in their hands now had names. The pine cone was called the Mololu, and the so-called handbag. It was the bandu. These were not mysterious magical objects. They were tools for a specific well-documented job. The bandu was a bucket. The mulalu was a purifier, most likely a cone from a date palm, and together they were used in a sacred ritual of purification and consecration. Imagine the scene. The Apkallu dips the cone into the bucket, which is filled with sacred water. Water that was often mixed with special oils or flour to make it even more ritually pure. Then he sprinkles this water onto the king or onto a sacred symbol known as the Tree of Life. Cuneiform texts describe this exactly. One tablet instructs, "Purify the chapel, sprinkle with holy water, ward off evil." The Abkalu were performing this precise ritual. This wasn't just about getting clean. It was a spiritual act. The sprinkling of this holy water was believed to transfer divine essence, to protect against evil forces, and to ensure the fertility and stability of the entire kingdom. It was a way of maintaining cosmic order, of keeping chaos at bay. The king purified by the Akalu was thus legitimized and empowered to rule. The images on the palace walls were not just decoration, they were a perpetual reenactment of this sacred ceremony, forever protecting the royal space. So after all that mystery, what is the verdict? According to mainstream scholarship, the Mesopotamian handbag is unequivocally a ritual bucket. It is the bandu, used in a specific purification ceremony alongside the mulu. These handbags had appeared only as mysterious carvings or reliefs. They surfaced in Mesopotamia. In its local context, it is not a mystery. The case, it seems, is closed. But if that is the complete answer, it only makes the global appearances of this symbol even more strange. Why would the Mech in Mexico need a Mesopotamian ritual bucket? And why was it carved at Gobekli thousands of years before the Assyrians even existed? The plot, as they say, thickens. The power of symbolism. So we have an answer. The handbag is a ritual bucket. But this answer leads directly to another even more puzzling question. If the bandu was a real physical object used in important ceremonies, where are they? Think about it. Archaeologists have excavated these ancient Mesopotamian cities for nearly 2 centuries. They have found countless artifacts, golden cups, elaborate jewelry, clay pots, stone tablets, and intricate tools, but they have never ever found a single physical object that looks like the stone-carved bandu. Not one. No bucket of gold, no basket of stone, no clay container. It's a complete absence, a ghost in the archaeological record. Compare this to Egypt. We've found actual ritual objects matching their wall paintings. Stone vessels, ceremonial fans, incense burners, but from Assyria, not one bandu. This is a massive hole in the story. How can something so important in art be so completely absent from the real world? There are a couple of ways to explain this. First, the simple theory. Maybe they were made from materials that just didn't survive the millennia. Perhaps the bandudu were beautifully woven from reeds that decayed or crafted from leather that crumbled to dust. Maybe they were even made of precious metals like gold or silver, but were later melted down for their value. This is possible, but it feels a little unsatisfying for an object that was so universally depicted. This leads to the second and much stronger theory. What if the carved handbag wasn't meant to be a photorealistic drawing of a specific bucket? What if it was a symbol? Think about the tree of life that appears right next to it in these carvings. That tree doesn't look like any real tree. It's a strange, stylized, artificial thing. It's an idea, not a plant. The bandudu is likely the same. It was a piece of iconographic shorthand. In the visual language of the Assyrians, this specific shape instantly communicated a powerful concept. It was the logo for ritual purification and divine wisdom. It's like how we see a Red Cross today and immediately understand medical aid without anyone needing to show us an actual hospital, or how a heart shape represents love, not an anatomically correct heart. The bandu was a sign, not an object. This is where the true power of the symbol is revealed. Dr. Irene Winter, professor emerita at Harvard, who spent 40 years studying Mesopotamian art, argues in her published research that these palace wall carvings were far more than just decoration. They were performative. The carvings weren't decoration. They were actively performing magic, constantly protecting the palace. By chiseling the apkallu into the very walls of the palace, forever in the act of sprinkling sacred water, the king was making the ritual permanent. The purification wasn't a one-time event. It was eternal. Every time someone walked past that wall, the magic was happening again. It was a continuous loop of divine protection, a shield against chaos built directly into the foundation of the kingdom. In this grand scheme, the handbag wasn't just a bucket. It was a key prop in this never-ending cosmic performance. It was a visual guarantee of order, stability, and the king's divine right to rule. Its power wasn't in its physical form, but in its meaning. It told everyone who saw it that this space was sacred, protected, and connected directly to the gods. This solves the local mystery of Mesopotamia in a brilliant way. But it also makes the global mystery even deeper. Because if the handbag is a symbolic idea and not a practical object, then the question changes. It's no longer, how did this bucket travel the world? The question becomes, how did this same powerful idea about containing the sacred appear in the minds of people who were completely disconnected? And that is a question that takes us into truly fascinating territory. The Gobekli Tepe anomaly. To understand the full mystery, we must travel back in time, not just centuries, but 6,000 years before the Assyrians, to a site that single-handedly rewrites the story of human civilization. Gobekli Tepe. This place is unlike any other. Built around 9,600 BCE, it was a world of hunter-gatherers, people who lived off the land without cities, without writing, and without metal tools. This is 5,000 years before writing was invented. Stonehenge wouldn't exist for another 7,000 years. The pyramids were 6,500 years in the future. The textbook theory always said that humans had to invent farming first, settle down, grow crops, and then they would have the time and resources to build grand temples and complex societies. Gobekli Tepe turns that idea completely on its head. Here it appears they built the temple first. This was a monumental sanctuary, a cathedral from the Stone Age constructed by a society we never knew was capable of such things. The scale is mind-boggling. They carved massive multi-ton stone pillars from the bedrock and arranged them into great circular enclosures. The effort required is almost unimaginable. And carved onto these towering T-shaped pillars, among terrifying depictions of foxes, scorpions, and birds, we find it once more, the handbag. But here it is different. At Gobekli Tepe, the handbag is not held by a winged genie in a ritual. It stands alone, carved in isolation. It appears as a distinct abstract symbol, often positioned above the heads of animals. The core form is unmistakable, that same rectangle with a curved handle on top. But its context is entirely new and strange. It's not part of a scene we can easily read. It is a symbol placed among other powerful symbols, a piece of a visual language that is utterly lost to us. This discovery creates a huge problem. The people of Gobekli Tepe had no conceivable connection to the Mesopotamians. They existed in a different world, separated by an unimaginable gulf of time. There was no trade, no migration, no shared culture that could explain this. So why is this symbol here? How can the same image appear in two places with 6 millennia between them? This isn't just a coincidence, it feels like a message. Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who led excavations from 1996 until his death in 2014, wrote that these symbols likely weren't depicting real containers. In his interpretation, their placement high on pillars among animal reliefs suggested they held cosmological or shamanic significance, possibly representing thresholds between the physical and spiritual realms. Others have wondered if it represents a celestial body like the moon, or a more general, powerful idea of containing spiritual power or the very essence of life itself. The meaning at Gobekli Tepe is still debated, but one thing is crystal clear. This symbol's roots are far older and more fundamental than anyone ever suspected. It isn't an Assyrian invention, it is something much more primal, emerging from the deepest foundations of the human psyche. This is the first major crack in a neat and tidy explanation. It proves the symbol transcends a single culture or time period. The Mesopotamians didn't create it. They inherited an ancient idea and gave it their own specific meaning. And just when you think the mystery cannot get any deeper, the story makes an even more dramatic leap. The plot doesn't just jump forward in time. It vaults across an entire ocean to a completely separate cradle of civilization. The connection. Centuries later and thousands of miles away, a new power was rising. In the humid lowlands of what is now Mexico, the first great civilization of the Americas was taking shape. These were the people who laid the groundwork for all the complex cultures that would follow, from the Maya to the Aztecs. And in their art, we find the mystery waiting for us once again. The most famous example comes from an ancient site called La Venta. Here, archaeologists uncovered a stunning stone sculpture known as Monument 19. The carving shows a man sitting as if in a state of calm power. But he isn't just any man. He is depicted emerging from the gaping jaws of a feathered serpent. This creature is a very early version of a god that would later be known throughout Mesoamerica as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity of wisdom and life. The scene is clearly one of transformation and divine connection. And there, held firmly in the figure's hand, is the object, the same rectangular pouch, the same curved handle. It is a mirror image of the symbol from across the world. The similarity is so precise it is jarring. This is not a vague resemblance. The form is identical. So what could it mean in this completely different context? For the Olmec, the object likely had its own local meaning deeply tied to their worldview. Among interpretations proposed by Mesoamerican archaeologists, one suggests that it represents a bag of copal incense. Copal was a sacred resin burned throughout Mesoamerica. The smoke was believed to carry prayers up to the gods and to help shamans communicate with the spirit world. In this context, the figure could be a shaman or a ruler using the incense to connect with the divine serpent spirit, the bag serving as a vessel for this powerful spiritual tool. Another compelling idea is that it represents a sacred bundle. In many Mesoamerican cultures, rulers and priests carried bundles that contained objects of immense power, relics, charms, or symbols that legitimized their authority and connected them to their ancestors. These bundles were more than just bags. They were the very heart of political and spiritual power. The later Maya had their god bundles, and the Olmec may have had a similar concept. Maya codices show rulers carrying wrapped bundles during coronation ceremonies. These contained jade, obsidian, and ancestor relics, the physical proof of divine authority. The bag then would symbolize the container of kingship and divine knowledge. But here lies the crucial, inescapable point. There is absolutely no evidence, no archaeological, genetic, or historical data to suggest that the Olmec and the Mesopotamians ever met. They were separated by the vast Atlantic Ocean, developing their civilizations in total isolation from one another. The Atlantic crossing wasn't achieved until 1492. These carvings were made 2,400 years earlier. There was no contact, no shared knowledge, no trade routes. No Mesopotamian artifacts have ever been found in Mexico. No Olmec DNA appears in Middle Eastern populations. No shared crop species. No common trade goods. No similar metalwork techniques. The evidence for isolation is absolute. The possibility of transoceanic contact is dismissed by mainstream scholars. This leaves only two possibilities, and both are profound. The first is that this is simply one of the most incredible coincidences in human history. That two cultures independently designed the exact same stylized symbol for a sacred container. The second, far more intriguing possibility is that the similarity points to something deeper within the human mind itself. That this shape is not an invention, but an intuition. A symbol that emerges naturally when humans try to give form to the concept of holding something sacred. This is where the mystery truly deepens, and the answer becomes something that changes everything beyond the bucket. So here is the situation. We have a ritual bucket in Mesopotamia, a potential spiritual portal in prehistoric Turkey, and an incense bag or sacred bundle in Mexico. The specific stories are different, but the form is identical. This is where the simple explanation ends, and the truly fascinating one begins. This is where the story changes everything. Now, a popular idea out there is the ancient astronaut theory. This suggests that these handbags were pieces of advanced technology carried by extraterrestrial visitors, and that's why we see them everywhere. It's a compelling sci-fi story. However, mainstream scholarship completely dismisses this idea. Why? Because it ignores the specific cultural meanings we can decipher. We know what the object was in Mesopotamia because we can read their texts. The theory also relies on a huge assumption for which there is not a single piece of physical or textual evidence. It solves one mystery by creating a much bigger, unproven one. It essentially replaces the incredible achievements of our ancestors with a narrative that requires no further explanation. The real story is far more interesting because it is about us. So if it wasn't aliens and it wasn't direct contact, what is left? The answer might lie not in ancient history, but deep within the human mind itself. The explanation comes from psychology, not archaeology. In the 20th century, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung proposed a controversial idea that psychologists still debate. He called it collective unconscious. Think of it not as a shared memory, but as a deep psychic inheritance, a set of built-in software for our minds, preloaded with certain fundamental patterns. Within this inheritance are universal patterns called archetypes. These are primal blueprints for symbols that appear in dreams, stories, and art across all cultures throughout all time. The hero's journey appearing in myths from Greece to Japan. The Great Mother, universal across cultures, and the vessel. These are not learned. They are innate, part of the fundamental structure of how we perceive the world. And one of the most powerful and recurring archetypes is the vessel, the container. This is the symbol for something that holds, protects, and carries something of immense value. It is the womb, the shrine, the sacred chest. And that is exactly what the handbag represents across these cultures. It is not a single object that was passed around. It is a universal idea taking a similar shape in different minds because the underlying psychological template is the same. In each culture, this container archetype holds something sacred appropriate to that place and time. For the Mesopotamian Apkallu, the bandudu contains the water of ritual purification, and the very essence of divine knowledge used to maintain cosmic order. For the builders of Gobekli Tepe, the symbol positioned near spirit animals might have contained spiritual essence, representing a gateway or portal to another world for the shamans who used the site. For the Olmec ruler, it contained the copal incense, or the sacred relics, the very tools of power that connected him to the feathered serpent and legitimized his rule. The shape is the same because the underlying human concept is the same, a portable, protective container for the sacred. This profound idea of the sacred container echoes powerfully in myths and traditions from every corner of the world. It is a theme that the human psyche returns to again and again. In medieval European legends, knights quested for the Holy Grail, the ultimate vessel said to contain divine grace and the power of eternal life. In the Hebrew tradition, the Ark of the Covenant was not just a box, it was the ultimate container for the stone tablets of God's law, making it the most sacred object of the Israelite people. And in many indigenous North American cultures, medicine bags are carried by healers and leaders, containing bones, stones, and herbs that connect them to the spirit world and hold potent medicine. The handbag, therefore, may not be a single physically transmitted object. It is a fundamental shape that the human mind independently arrives at again and again to represent the concept of portable, contained sacredness. It is the ultimate symbol for the vessel of civilization itself, the thing that carries our most precious knowledge, our spiritual power, and the very essence of what a culture holds dear. It tells us that while our ancient ancestors built their worlds in isolation, they were all dreaming with the same symbolic language, trying to give form to the same profound idea, how to hold the divine in their hands. It is a shared dream of humanity carved in stone across the ages. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.